This podcast is presented by Skies Magazine. If you're interested in the Canadian aviation industry, Skies is your go-to multimedia resource for the latest news, in-depth features, stunning photography, and insightful video coverage. Whether you're an aviation professional or enthusiast, Skies is dedicated to keeping you informed and bringing your passion for aviation to life. Visit skiesmag.com to learn more and subscribe to stay updated on all things Canadian aviation.
Fuel and ignition switches on. RPM switches set. TD switches normal. Doors and hatches closed. Light out. Strobe light on. Restart check is complete. Clear left. Engineers, start number 2. Starting 2. Wind 310, Pilot Project Podcast, clear takeoff, runway 31 left.
All right, we're ready for departure here at the Pilot Project Podcast, the best source for stories and advice from RCAF and mission aviation pilots, brought to you by Skies Magazine. I'm your host, Brian Morrison. With me today is Trevor Juby, a retired RCAF Lieutenant-Colonel and current base chief pilot with PAL Aerospace in Curaçao, and Pat Lalande, a retired RCAF Master Warrant Officer and current Tactical Coordinator and Mission Commander with PAL Aerospace in Curaçao. Guys, welcome back to the show, and I'm really looking forward to this. Listeners can check out part 1 to hear about Trevor and Pat's early career and what led them to their early flying experiences. Now for part 2, we're going to focus on some of their operational experiences and start discussing their role down with PAL Aerospace and the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard. So we're going to shift back to Pat and talk about some of his operational experiences in the RCAF. So Pat, we've said you were unexpectedly switched to a posting at 407 Maritime Patrol Squadron in Comox, BC. What was life like on an operational squadron for a new ASOP, and how did it compare to your previous life in the Army?
You know, even looking back this far out, it was probably the best time that I had was as a brand new guy arriving on squadron. I made the move. I arrived. I unpacked, and there was only 2 of us that were new sensor operators on the squadron. So everything that happened was it was literally take the new guy with you. Take the new guy with you. I only had 3 flights on the squadron, and then it was like, yeah, there's a crew going to San Diego for a month. Pack your bags. You're going with them.
Nice.
Yeah, that was my first month on the squadron. I just looked at my logbook, and I flew 3 times, and then it's like go to California for a month. And was spent a month chasing submarines and flying around warships and you know, doing that naval warfare thing. It was great. And when you got back from that, I'm still the only new guy. There's still only 2 new guys. Yeah. Okay. Crew 5 is going on this exercise. So yeah, take the new guy with you. I was like, oh, I'm going again. It's like, it would, I spent a lot of time away from home, but it was always new training opportunity, a new training opportunity, one after the other. So that I look back on it, and that time as a brand new guy on the squadron was great because everybody wanted to take the new guy to learn stuff. So it was always one trip after another, one training exercise after another. I'd say, even looking at it back now, that it was the best of time.
407 Squadron is known for getting to go to a lot of amazing places for exercises. What was your favorite destination, and what was the biggest thing you learned in those years with all those great training opportunities?
So in those years when I was a brand new guy, we went a lot of places. So my family it doesn't feel bad for me that I went to Hawaii at least 5 or 6 times a year, sometimes for a month or 2. So it's difficult to explain to family members that, I don't want to go to work. I have to go to Hawaii one more time.
Yeah.
So you don't get a lot of sympathy, but Hawaii was a regular place for 407 Squadron for either things like RIMPAC in July, or we went for 2 weeks at a time sometimes for U.S. Submarine Commanders course to practice ASW.
Yep.
But I also almost went once a month to California, to San Diego. And out of all the years that I spent in Comox, San Diego was my favorite place to go. It's probably my favorite city in North America, but the training there was always really good.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great base to fly from. There was always submarines to train on. There was always aircraft carriers and warships and complex exercises. You just crammed so much into 2 weeks, and it was always you learned new tactics. You learned how to work in broader air campaigns and naval campaigns. It was always something new and new place to experience. And as I went back multiple times, I knew where to go. I got used to where to go, where to eat, where to stay. I absolutely can't say anything bad about operating out of anywhere in San Diego as an Aurora guy.
Yeah, I did my check ride in San Diego, and what a amazing city. It's just like the weather is great, the scenery is great. Flying out of North Island was really cool. Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything bad to say about San Diego.
Yeah, it's the perfect place to be deployed to, and the training that happens out of that base is just second to none.
So you also took part in the effort to oust Gaddafi in Op Mobile. Can you tell us about your experiences there, and what was the mission of the Aurora?
Yeah, so that was in 2011, and I knew that two things were coming to an end at the time. Was my time on the high readiness crew was within a month or so to end, and I knew that from talking to the career manager that I was posted that year as well. So my brain was on, okay, the time at the squadron is winding down. And then all of a sudden, one day on a Saturday morning, the phone rang. I was the lead sensor operator still on the high readiness crew. And the flight commander said, I need you to pack your bags for probably 56 days. You might be leaving today. We don't know yet. If you don't hear anything, come in with your bags on Monday morning. Call your guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went through the evolution of calling the other sensor operators on the crew and explained to them that, yes, I know it's early on Saturday. No, this is not a joke. Pack your bags. And nothing through the weekend. And then on Monday morning, did as we were told, showed up with my bags. And then it was the massive effort of getting through the DAG process before lunch, because we were planning to take off and head for Greenwood in the afternoon.
Wow.
I was like, oh, this is fast.
You were supposed to DAG. What does DAG stand for again? Can you remember?
Departure Assistance Group, I think it was.
Basically, for the listeners, it is a huge checklist that you need to get signed off from all the various places on base, basically saying, yes, this person is ready to deploy.
Yeah, so we went through that process, loaded the airplane with everybody's luggage, all the mission equipment that we were going to take with us. And we left for Greenwood and arrived that night. And then the next morning, it was like, oh, the deployment might be canceled. Don't get your hopes up. An election was called. So we thought, the government's not going to do anything now. And went to bed, and then the next morning, knocking on my door is our TAC nav, Kurt Lunenberg, knocking on the door. Says, Pat, I know you're. Let me know if you're awake enough to have a conversation. So I said, yeah. He goes, we're leaving, like right now.
Oh,
okay. So we went through the evolution of reloading the airplane and getting going, and no destination in mind. We were told, take off, head to the east, and we'll call you to tell you what base or what country you need to land in.
that's crazy. Man, that must have been fairly stressful for the crew commander.
Oh, yeah. You can't really plan for anything, and then of course we had nothing at the other end. Derek Hott was major, and he was the detachment commander at the time. Came with our crew. And eventually it was decided we were going to Sigonella in Sicily, which is great because it's a familiar base to the Aurora fleet.
Yep.
We went on exercise there a couple times a year. So we ended up there, and the typical Roto Zero things. We landed, and it was like, find a place to stay, find some cars, everything from scratch. So that's what I love about Roto Zeros is the lines haven't been drawn for you yet. So you got to figure it out. You get to set it all up. So it was a really exciting time to set up a brand new operation from scratch. And then of course, start operational flying almost immediately. So doing set up life and fly your missions at the same time. It was an exciting time, and it was very challenging for everybody involved.
And what was the mission at that time for the Aurora?
So for us at the beginning, it was embargo enforcement on weapons coming in. So our first few missions were sort of parked in a box over the Mediterranean, looking for suspicious vessels bringing in weapons into Libya. But that did not last very long. I think we only did 2 of those missions before the focus became entirely on the war on land. So we would hang out just off the shore with sensors and essentially look for activity to report back with intelligence on what was happening on the ground in Libya. And that also quickly morphed into now we were cooperating with Allied assets, looking for targets for the fighters to strike. And it was very dynamic. Thankfully, at the time, we had already been practicing and training the overland mission for during exercises for the last 2-3 years. But it was a lot of developing procedures on the fly because we hadn't practiced all of these things. The situation on the ground was sometimes very confusing. So again, it was very exciting because we had to basically invent new procedures and new way of doing things as we were doing them and responding to a situation on the ground that wasn't always clear. So it was about as challenging as it could get at the time for flying in the LRP fleet.
Yeah, I sort of had a similar experience doing Roto Zero in Kuwait over Iraq. It's exciting, and you're kind of, like you said, you're not making it up as you go, but like there is a certain amount of figuring things out as you go along, and it is an exciting time. Did you witness or take part in anything exciting, or was it a lot of long, quiet patrols?
It's the LRP fleet, so there's always 90% boredom and interrupted by 10% of sheer terror.
Yeah.
So the 10% were always fun. I remember being tasked on a mission and we were looking for mobile Scud launchers. And, as a teenager, I grew up glued to watching CNN during the Gulf War. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm looking for what? Scud missiles? Yeah. I'm sorry, like, what year is this? And following tanks and coordinating strikes by Canadian F-18s was something that was new. We had never really trained for that, but it was exciting to watch not just watch, but be in the middle of an actual air war and having to pay attention all of a sudden to things like the air tasking orders and what AWACS are we working with today.
And for the listeners, AWACS is Airborne Warning and Control System. It's basically the airplane you see with a giant radar sitting on its back, and it essentially works as an airborne air traffic controller as well as threat detection and a number of other functions.
What ships are available in the area, it was an actual full spectrum operation. And professionally, it was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. It was really, really good.
That's awesome. So you were whisked away to Ottawa for a ground job, but as per tradition in your career, you were quickly posted back to 407 Squadron as ASOP Training Officer, ASOP Standards Officer, and Senior ASOP, where you reached the rank of Master Warrant Officer. During this tour, you deployed to Op Impact for 9 months and flew 31 missions while holding a full-time ground job. For a lot of us in the Aurora community, this time period was very challenging. How was it for you?
About as challenging as it would have been for everyone, because everything, of course, was at the last minute. I had just come off, as you mentioned, a short posting in Ottawa, which was another. As soon as I unpacked, the career manager tells me turn around and go back. Took a job back at 407 Squadron and train new people, and then all of a sudden one day the stuff was starting to boil over in Iraq with ISIS. And I remember being in the ops lounge watching TV when the government announced, okay, we're sending jets, we're sending refuelers, and we're also sending long range patrol aircraft. And I looked at my boss and he said, go to clothing stores, get some tan colored gear,
Yeah.
and pack your bags. And I'm like, when? Oh, like now. Go to clothing stores immediately. A mass panic. So it was challenging because I was a single parent at the time. So I had to figure that out. Essentially, this was on a Wednesday. I deployed on the weekend, and it was so I had to quickly make family arrangements and deploy to something we didn't know. Like before the crews arrived, such as yourself, to the base in Kuwait. When we got there, I got off the C-17. And all we had was an ATCO trailer that had previously been on fire.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, exactly. And you could, if you knew where to look, you could see the remnants of the fire that had been in there. And it was just me, Alex Gignac, and Ray Townsend. And it was like, okay, you need to set up a fully functional long-range patrol detachment here with this. And the airplanes are arriving in a few days.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so we had to tactically acquire a lot of things from vehicles for maintenance to haul parts to beds for the crews to sleep in, and there was a lot of competition for real estate because you also had a Hercules detachment showing up. You had the refueling jets, the Airbuses that were coming, all the support for the entire air task force. And the joint task force, everybody was arriving at the same time. So it was a lot of, we worked a lot of 20-hour days to create a flying unit out of nothing.
That's crazy. And just from the perspective of the people who showed up with things being set up by you guys did a great job because we had great accommodations. We had little, we were 4 to a room at first, which was a little tight with the gear and everything. But that quickly improved. And honestly, anyone who's ever been in the Army is laughing at me right now for complaining about that. We had, a hard-sided shelter with air conditioning and blackout. Like the windows were boarded over, so it was blackout and you could sleep at any time during the day. Like you guys did a great job.
Thanks. It was a lot of work and a lot of negotiation with people to make it happen, which is great because I ran into so many people that I knew that I didn't even know were deployed. I'd be walking down to some random office like transport. Hey, we used to work together and blah, blah, blah. And name whatever base or unit. And it'd be like, hey, what do you need? I really need a pickup truck for my maintenance guys. Oh, sure. Just by the sheer weight of relationships that you had built over the years, it was really, it helped a lot to make it happen. And it wasn't always perfect. And there was situations where it was a lot of times I had to explain to the crews coming in, I'm like, trust me, sign here. I know it sounds bad, but it's going to be, the fix is in. Just trust me.
I remember that.
Take a leap of faith. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because I had that you'd remember that. I had to tell people, trust me, it'll be fixed. Just sign a paper.
Yeah. What was the biggest thing you learned during this tour in Kuwait and flying over Iraq?
Training works. Trust everything that you've been trained to do, because even when you're in a situation that is outside of what you're trained, your training will guide you to the answer. As the operations guy, it always worked for me. I was always able to figure out what to do simply because of the training that I had. So training works. It does what it's supposed to do, and as long as you're willing to put in the work and the effort. And I learned that everybody wants to do the right thing. It's just sometimes they don't know how. So if you teamwork makes the dream work, they say. And it was never more obvious than when I went to Kuwait.
Yeah, for sure. So Trevor, let's take some time to talk about your operational experiences in the RCAF. Can you describe some highlights from your early years flying operationally on the Aurora?
Yeah, okay. So the Aurora, 407 Squadron, great squadron. Did 5 years there until about April 08. Reached Maritime Patrol Crew Commander, Unit ICP, PSTO roles as Pilot Standards Training Officer. we had, of course, all the West Coast deployments, which I know some of the guys at Greenwood at times were jealous of.
For sure.
I've been to Hawaii more times than I can count, 5, 6 times. It kind of became a joke. It was like, oh, we're going to Hawaii again. San Diego, obviously, quite a lot down there on exercise. Also got a chance to go over to Kinloss, Scotland, which was a great time. Stayed at the Alton Bain Hotel. I had a pub in the basement. Some really good memories there. Shemya for DriftNet patrols, and then we started obviously into the overland role. So we a lot of stuff in Wainwright, a lot of stuff in Palm Springs, a lot of northern deployments as well. Actually, one of the highlights I can remember was getting a chance to return to Whitehorse with the Aurora for the Sourdough Air Show. Many of the military members listening will know the Sourdough Air Show.
That must have felt like a pretty cool full circle moment.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I had a chance to bring the air cadets out, give them a tour of the aircraft, and that was really cool. Full circle, circle of life type of thing. Of course, it brings back memories too of the Sunday party at Jack Kingscote's place. He just passed away actually recently. That was such a popular air show that I remember during the summertime, my dad and I had to go over to Jack's place and help reinforce his back deck because so many people would come outside and stand on it that it started to collapse. So we went over it and reinforced it during the summer. Cold air show, static air show. I mean, I remember my APU on the Aurora froze. We had to get a Herman Nelson cold hot air on it to start it up. But yeah, good memories of flying the Aurora, and really the first big aircraft that I flew that I realized you can reach out and touch anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
global deployable capability, which kind of it's something I've remembered for my whole career.
Yeah, it really is an awesome, super capable, super flexible aircraft, and it's on its way out. The P8 will be replacing it in the next 5 to 10 years. We've already got crews training on them, but it'll be sad to see the P3s kind of fade into the mist.
Yeah, beautiful aircraft. Loved it.
So something that was new at the time, which now the Aurora does extensively, is overland intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, or ISR work, which we talked a little bit about with Pat. You were around when the MX-20 camera first came on board. How did this tool take the Aurora from a sub-hunter into overland tactics?
Yeah, suddenly we weren't over water anymore. We weren't due regard. We were overland in different airspace, usually high level to ensure covert status. And we were learning how to use that MX-20. I can remember the growing pains with the ASOPs, and you'll remember this, Pat, how you had to input the elevation of the target you were looking at, because obviously the Earth is not one level, and depending on the elevation, you could be looking in the wrong spot. All those growing pains happened as we learned, and Wainwright became a location we'd frequent quite a lot for exercises because it was close enough that we could do it in a hop for Comox. We'd also deploy there and do exercises. Of course, we did a lot in the U.S. Yeah, I deployed to Cold Lake, staying in the motel there beside the Cold Lake, the infamous bar. I don't know what it's named now. Flying overland missions brings back some good memories.
A really cool opportunity came your way, and you ended up flying the NATO AWACS E-3A Boeing 707. Can you tell us how that came about and what your experiences were like on that aircraft?
Yeah, so that's a good story, actually. Right place, right time in the military is a lot of the reasons you go places, right? Pat's got examples. I've got so many examples through my career, just right place, right time. So it's 2008. I'm doing well at 407 Squadron, loving Comox, loving the job. Crew commander in the pilot pool system. That was back when we went to the pool system. We went away from the crews for a while because we were short. We were losing guys to airlines, so there was a pilot pool, a flight engineer pool, an ASOP pool, and you just pick from the pool to fly. So I'm in the pilot pool, the pilot pit, as we call it, on a Friday. It's an office day, and really I'm just sitting there waiting for the mess to open in Comox. I'm waiting to go over to the snake pit. And Comox is one of those places on a Friday afternoon, if the weather is nice, there's not a lot of people around the squadron.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do. So if you can believe it, this is before, I'm dating myself here, this is before really cell phones were big, where you could sit there and surf the net, and there's no magazines laying around, no flight safety magazines to read. So I literally had my AOIs open in my lap because I was looking at something that I had thought about.
And for the listeners, AOIs are aircraft operating instructions that basically describes all the systems and how to operate the aircraft.
And the CO walked in. Talk about timing, right? Mike Hogan. And I was the only guy in there. And he's like, Juby, what are you doing in here on a Friday afternoon? And I'm like, I'm doing a little studying, sir. And so that started the conversation. He's like, well, I got a problem. I need a pilot to go to Germany on the AWACS. It's 407 squadron's turn. And I don't want someone that will embarrass the family. So he said, are you interested? And, at the time I was approaching posting season. One of my instructors in Boost Jaw had moved to Snowbirds, and during spring training, as you know, Snowbirds do spring training in Comox. And the year passed, he had come out and give me a chance to go with a practice show with him. Man, I love formation flying from Moose Jaw. Love the Snowbirds, and possibility to be a Canadian symbol would have been an amazing experience. So I had a kind of expressed interest in Snowbirds, so considered throwing my hat in the ring for a tryout. It's a couple ex-Snowbirds on 407. They'd start to give me some advice. And then both PSTOs, the Status and Training Officers in Greenwood, put their releases in, and they went to WestJet. And so, you start to hear these posting whispers about Greenwood, and it was looking more and more likely for him. And now I get this Friday conversation with the CO. Hey, do you want to go OutCan? Do you want to go to GK? So, suffice to say, I had a quick conversation that weekend with my wife, and we were posted. And over we went to Germany. What an amazing opportunity.
You mentioned GK, that's Geilekirchen in Germany, right?
Everyone calls it GK because it's such a mouthful, but Geilekirchen, Germany, where the NATO bases, where they have the NATO AWACS squadrons based. That was one of the highlights of my career. It's going over there, the posting, because everyone that goes over there, they get posted into certain slots. So I knew that I was going over for 2 years in the operational squadron, and then I'd be 2 years in the training squadron. And that was also really exciting to eventually get a chance to be an instructor there. And the first 2 years, it was as you hear these places around the world, a flying club. It was training. We weren't at war. Deployed all around Europe. I reached aircraft captain status, instructor, and eventually evaluator status on the jet. Had forward operating bases. So NATO has forward operating bases in Trapani, Italy, in Lalande, Norway, in Konya, Turkey, and Preveza, Greece. And all over the place we flew. I mean, Berlin Air Show, the Slovakia Air Show, which I never thought I'd go to Slovakia for an air show, but we were one of the most popular jets to arrive. And then, of course, after 2 years, we started to get into the wartime environment. So Libya kicked off, and I deployed to Libya 3 times. We were job in Libya was to enforce the no-fly zone, and we were one of the first high-value assets to move over land, which was always something that was made you pay attention, because you were assuming that all the surface-to-air threats were eliminated. One really cool, actually, story, I'll keep it somewhat on class, was that nearing the end of the conflict, it was our weapons controllers in the back that were controlling the F-16s that bombed Gaddafi's compound as he was trying to escape the city, which eventually led to his overthrow.
Crazy.
So it was it was cool to see that come to an end and for us to be part of it.
Yeah, that's wild. That's a piece of history for sure.
Yeah.
So Canada is looking at acquiring airborne early warning aircraft, potentially the E-7A Wedgetail among a few options. Regardless of which aircraft is chosen, what will it take to stand up this capability, and why do you think it's important?
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about it a little bit earlier. We've seen the Prime Minister's latest pledge to hit the 5% spending by 2035. So 3.5 on defense and 1.5 on infrastructure. So what will it take to stand it up? We have the subject matter knowledge in the RCAF right now to stand this capability up. Some of the smartest people I know are Royal Canadian Air Force weapons controllers. They are next level. I think their trade actually has more outcam positions than any other trades combined. I joke about, because when I talk with the guys and gals that do that, they seem like they're always outcam.
Yeah.
And the pilot knowledge will be there. This is a jet. The 737 is something that we will be familiar with. There's many of us that have served that have Boeing experience, but as we move to the P8, you'll see that the experience will be there, especially with the air-to-air refueling knowledge. That will only increase with the P8, which is, from my time with the AWACS, is some of the most challenging but rewarding flying I've ever done. Is taking gas from another large aircraft in a tanko track, and that guys and gals will just get better at that as we go. And why? Why do we think it's important? Well, an airborne early warning aircraft, it's only going to augment what the RCAF leadership has already put in motion, and this is going to be another piece of this integrated multi-layer ISR sensor approach to Canada's coastlines, north, east, and west. And I think it's a super exciting capability that's coming down the pipe, and what a great time to be in the RCAF.
Yeah, we've got a lot of new capabilities that are going to be stood up, and I think, while it's going to be challenging from a personnel perspective, in terms of just personnel levels, the staffing levels, I think there's so many exciting opportunities coming up with these new aircraft that honestly, I think I'm a little jealous of anyone who's joining, in the next, like now and in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
just
totally.
with all the stuff that's coming online, it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, agree.
So you finished your time in the RCAF as a lieutenant colonel, and your billet as a CO was at 17 Wing Operations Support Squadron, or OSS. During this time, you were also able to augment 402 Squadron as a Dash 8 pilot, which was a huge opportunity. What was the biggest challenge you faced at that time, particularly with balancing your CO duties while maintaining a flying category?
Okay, so the CO of OSS, it's a busy job. Any of the OSS COs across any of the wings will understand when I say this. And this was kind of the first time that they were combining wing ops, wing tests, persist, wing readiness, military police, FOL for the Hornet commissioners, and really you just became an overall problem solver. So the wing commander at the time was Andy Cook, and he is a pilot's pilot, and he was actually flying time to time with the Herc Squadron in Winnipeg, and he very much believed that keeping flying as a pilot in higher ranks was important. It allowed you not only to get the much needed morale boost for yourself, working what is predominantly a ground job. It gives you that little bit of mental health to go flying, but it also gave a chance to see the wing at the operational level. And seeing the wing in its operating areas is different if you're in wing ops on the ground versus actually in the aircraft. 402, they have some amazing experience with that squadron, some really, really experienced pilots. And I was fortunate to get a chance to fly and learn from them and augment them. And yeah, I was able to successfully balance the CO duties with the flying cat. Careful selection of the flights. I became very good friends with the scheduler. And on the 9 busy days, and you could pick them out as you knew your schedule. And usually you were pretty safe on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, but you knew that usually Mondays and Fridays were your busy days as OSS duties. And then I had a very competent chief, and I had a very, very competent DCO. And they were able to take some of the load when I'd be up flying.
It's great to hear that you were able to keep that flying going as a CO. It's not something everybody gets to do, although it does seem to be becoming a more common again from like the interviews I've done recently. But that's great that you're able to do that. And obviously, like you said, you gave credit to your chief, and that's a huge piece of the puzzle, right? Is the support from your NCMs and your senior NCOs, and the military runs on them, right?
Exactly. And there's very much an angle to this that's street credit, right? You need to understand the operation from its most basic tactical level if you're going to command at the tactical and operational levels.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that you get your hand in it and you understand what your troops are doing from grassroots level.
For sure.
And it is fun. I mean, pilots want to fly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a story for both of you guys. Apparently, you shared the experience of having a near miss. Can you both tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. How about I just lay out the groundwork and you can add in
Absolutely.
behind it. Yeah. So I definitely used up one of my 9 lives that day for sure. We're in Palm Springs. We're doing overland training with the Marines headed to Iraq. We're in the range, acting as covert aircraft. It's dusk, so it's on the way to darkness, but just not there. And we have a thunderstorm that's building behind us, masking us, pushing us closer and closer to the edge of the range, but we're still inside the range. 2 U.S. Hornets enter the range, not on comms, not checking into range control, and came as close as I want to see another aircraft that I'm not in formation.
Wow.
Over to you, Pat.
Yeah. So we're just on the edge of the where we're going to turn around, and of course the confusion about what happened and where did these guys come from, and discussions internally to the crew and externally with range control. These people are. And it ended up being a bit of a butting heads conflict in between the aircraft captain and the tactical coordinator in the back, and sort of me in the middle, because I had just gone to the cockpit to figure out what happened. And I've seen one of the pilots looked like he'd seen a ghost. Wasn't Trevor. He'd seen a ghost. That the TAC nav in the back is mad because now there's this difference of opinion. And I'm just conflict is never good. So
sure,
we did the right thing. We went home. Well, I say home, but we went back to Palm Springs to talk about what happened. Because it's the old saying, it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than being flying wishing you were on the ground. But it was my first real exposure to that level of disagreement between 2 layers of command.
In the end, it's it's still used as an Aurora CRM example of how things can the Swiss cheese can line up.
This requires a little explanation for the listeners. CRM is crew resource management and is basically the interactions amongst the crew and how well they're working together. The Swiss cheese comment is basically if you imagine layers of Swiss cheese with holes in it. Each layer represents a layer between you and risk, and the risk getting through and becoming an incident. And we kind of say the Swiss cheese is lining up when all the holes start to feel like they're lining up and there's an increased level of risk of something bad happening.
And we definitely got lucky that night. And Pat and I still fondly talk about the conversation with the taco in the back.
How close would you say you guys were to the F-18s?
I saw them as they approached, but I wasn't flying. My first officer was flying in a left-hand bank, and I saw them push the control yoke forward. I had no time to say anything other than brace, and we did miss them. But I don't know. I think back to that day, and I think it would have been different if I hadn't have taken some action for sure. Close
enough that you said brace. That's crazy.
Yeah, we were so close that we could, you could literally see the pilots in their cockpits.
That's crazy. That's wild. So let's talk about how you guys started working with PAL. So for both of you, what road led to work with PAL and particularly to take on the mission of counter-narcotics?
Okay, so for me, like I was familiar with PAL and that the company existed because they had an operation in Comox working a contract for the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So I had heard of them and I knew people that worked there, but it was, I wasn't ready for leaving the military or anything like that. And I certainly wasn't eligible for my pension. So they're sort of a pension prisoner kind of thing. I was working the project office in Ottawa for the fixed wing search and rescue program that led to the Kingfisher, and sort of working a desk, itching to go back flying. But as a master warrant officer in the Air Force, it wasn't really going to be a reality. And then one day I got a message from a former colleague and friend of mine who had just taken a job in Curaçao as a sensor operator. And the message was short. It just said, "You need to send your resume to my boss right now." So, okay. To leap with both feet before looking. And I did that. And in the span of a weekend, that led to informal talks, to a formal interview, to a job offer inside of 48 hours. That's how I ended up making the switch from a ground job in the Air Force to a flying job with PAL down here in the Caribbean.
Wow. That moved fast, eh?
Very, very fast. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, okay, we're making you an offer, but here's the deal. We need an answer by Monday morning, first thing.
Wow.
The need was immediate, and me and my wife didn't have a whole lot of time to think about it, but we had to sit through the weekend and say, do we want to move to a whole other country and do it inside the next month? It was a whirlwind. It had to be decided fast, but that's exactly what we did. And the last 5 years are history now. We did it.
Awesome. How about you, Trevor?
Yeah, so my first exposure to PAL was in Comox, where they have their AMSD operation.
What's AMSD?
Maritime Surveillance Division. So at the time, they were flying King Airs out of Comox, actually out of our hangar, where they shared a portion of the hangar. So I knew the operation, and my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, was flying as a aerial surveillance officer for Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Okay.
So I knew PAL. And then flash forward to, I'm in Winnipeg as the CO there. And at that rank, I realized I was getting further and further away from a cockpit. And when I was flying in Winnipeg, in my command tour and handling all these problems that I encountered during my 2 years there, I realized that the thing I looked forward to the most was my time flying with 402 and flying the Dash 8. So when I heard there was a position down here where I'd been before, actually with the Aurora many, many years ago, geez, do I wish I'd bought real estate. I took a chance. I threw my name in the hat, and they were actually quite far down the road in the application process. And similar to Pat, actually, I had about a weekend to decide if we wanted to do this. And the idea of returning to operational flying, living in the Caribbean, was really, in the end, an adventure that my family and I couldn't turn down. So we said yes.
Right on. What is PAL's mission overall in the Caribbean, and why are you based in Curaçao?
So overall mission in the Caribbean is to provide air power to the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard. Our primary role is actually search and rescue. We also support disaster relief, police and fisheries, customs, counter-narcotics, anything that our client would like the aircraft to do. We're based in Curaçao because it is central really to the Caribbean region, and it also has the Dutch Navy headquarters here, which makes it just an easy fusion of all the information. Rescue Coordination Center is also here. Anything you want to add to that, Pat?
We're based here. When they created the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard, the facility already existed from the Dutch Navy, so that's why it's based here. The facilities, the hangars, everything was already here, so that probably drove the choice of base location.
Okay, right on. Pat, you had conducted several deployments to do similar work in the Aurora with the RCAF. How did this help prepare you for this line of work?
Well, doing Op Carib in the Air Force, I had been here in Curaçao before for one deployment. I had done a deployment in Martinique, El Salvador, Key West, Florida. So I was already familiar with the counter-drug aspect and the organization of Jihad of South. So I was familiar with that. So I knew sort of what that part of the mission was about. I had seen Go Fasts before. I was familiar with the operational concept, so that was helpful when I arrived here and started flying and get through the training. So that was not foreign to me. But being a military guy, I was less familiar with the law enforcement aspects of what we do here. Being an Aurora guy, I had a bit of an introduction to SAR, but it's not something that I had done in this region before. So these things were all new, but the counter drug mission was not a new thing for me.
Okay. You mentioned Go Fast. Can you just quickly explain what that is?
It's the colloquial term for the vessels that are used to transport drugs. They tend to move at high speed, so they've been called Go Fasts.
Right on. Did either of you carry out any special flight training for counter-narcotics with PAL or have to learn any special tactics and procedures?
For me, it wasn't necessarily like special training. It's just when I got here, the client has a training program for their mission. So, of course, counter-narcotics is included in that training program. So there was nothing really from the PAL side. It was more the client and their mission and their requirements. They provided the training.
Okay, makes sense. How about for you, Trevor?
Yeah, the training specifically for the front end, we have a fairly robust training program for our guys where we move from the right seat to the left seat. Because it's not, you might find a -8 pilot who has flown to airlines and comes down, but it's nowhere close to the same thing.
Yeah.
So really what you're looking for is someone who has the maritime patrol background that can fly -8s. And of course, you can imagine that the low-level flying piece is something that requires some training, a robust amount of training for someone who's never been close to the water. I find that it's fairly easy for military or ex-military guys to pick that up. But a lot of the civilian guys who come here straight off the street that we do very rarely hire, usually we hire internally to the company because the company actually has a huge amount of experience in low-level flying and maritime patrol operations. So
for sure.
Most of those guys and gals that we bring down already have that piece in their toolbox. But one of the big things is the low-level flying.
Yeah, I can imagine for an airline pilot that would be really, really uncomfortable if they've never done that before. And now, like maybe they did a little bit of low-level flying, say when they were flying in a Cessna or something like. But to bring what they would think of as an airliner down low over the ocean would be pretty weird.
Yeah, we're authorized day VMC down to 100 feet. So that, if you remember your time in the Aurora, that gives you the speed rush. Guys who've never been down there before, it takes a little while for them to get used to it. Yeah,
for sure. Do you rotate in and out of the Caribbean or do you live there full time for this job?
We live here full time. Some of our maintenance personnel are rotational, but any of the pilots, TACO, sensor operators, living, as expats would in the Caribbean. Company provides an allowance for housing, but we do live on the economy.
Okay.
As you've heard guess that's a classic military term, but it just means you rent a house within a certain distance of the airfield, and your kids go to school here. Your spouses have the ability to work if they want. We're residents of Curaçao, which is also really cool because you're experiencing the culture of this island while you're doing the operation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's get an overall picture of operations. Trevor, what islands do you patrol and what is your operations area?
Okay, so the operations area is the Caribbean Sea, really, and everything in between. Normal islands, though, that we patrol, and you'll hear this, the ABC, which is Aruba, Bonaire, Curaçao.
Okay.
And then the Triple S, which is Saba, Station, St. Martin. And those are effectively the Dutch islands, or at least the islands that have patrols executed by the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard. Now, we can also be tasked for operations search and rescue in the whole Caribbean Sea, all the way out to Jamaica, to St. Croix and Puerto Rico, and then as far to the east into the Half Moon chain of Barbados.
Okay.
And anywhere in between. And that also goes for anti-narcotics operations. It's quite a vast area that we can control.
Yeah, I was going to say that's quite a wide area. That's a lot of ocean.
Exactly.
Do you deploy to any other locations?
Yeah, we do. So I've personally deployed to Aruba, Bonaire, St. Martin, Statia, Martinique, French island of Martinique. Really good fresh French loaf bread.
Yeah, and I've recently done a deployment to Aruba, and last year did a deployment to Martinique for a certain length of time. So we tend to get around the region.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. That's nice to get a little variety in.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for guys too. Living deployed ops is different than being at home. So it gives guys great experience, especially because we have some cycling of tacos, our client, in and out of here. So it gives them an opportunity to see deployed operations.
Okay, guys, that's going to wrap up part 2 of our chat for today. It was super interesting to hear about your careers in the RCAF, as well as the beginnings of what you guys do down in the Caribbean with PAL. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about the work you're doing down in Curaçao. Thank you again for being here today.
It was my pleasure, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I've actually wanted to be chat with you on this show for a while, so it's a pleasure to have this conversation.
Right on. All right, that wraps up part 2 of our chat with Trevor and Pat, where we discussed their operational careers in the RCAF, as well as the beginnings of what led them down to the Caribbean and working with PAL. For our next episode, tune in as we dive deep into their work with PAL and the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard. Do you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard in this show? Would you or someone you know make a great guest, or do you have a great idea for a show? You can reach out to us at thepilotprojectpodcast@gmail.com or on all social media at @podpilotproject. And be sure to check out that social media for lots of great videos of our RCAF and mission aviation aircraft. As always, we'd like to thank you for tuning in and ask for your help with the big 3. That's like and follow us on social media, share with your friends, and follow and rate us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Keep the blue side up. See ya!
Engineer, shut down all 4. Shutting down all 4 engines.